Officer James Brennan drove his police car slowly through the quiet streets of Springfield. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon. James had been a cop for 15 years. At 42, his dark hair now showed touches of gray at the temples. He lived alone since his wife Sarah died from cancer 5 years ago. They never had children. Unit 17, we have a domestic disturbance call at 1423 Maple Street. Neighbors report loud shouting and crying children. The radio crackled. Copy that. On my way, James responded, turning his car toward the east side of town. The house on Maple Street was small and needed repairs. Paint peeled from the walls, and the yard was overgrown. James knocked on the door. No answer. He heard children crying inside. Police officer, please open the door, he called out. A girl, maybe 14 years old, opened the door slightly. Her eyes were red from crying, but she stood tall. Are you okay? We got a call about shouting, James said gently. We're fine. Mom just had a bad day, the girl said, trying to close the door. James put his foot forward. I need to make sure everyone is safe. Can I come in? The girl hesitated, then opened the door wider. Inside, James found 5 more girls. The youngest looked about 2 years old, sitting on the floor clutching a worn teddy bear. The house was messy but clean. There was little food in the kitchen. I'm Tamara, the oldest girl said. These are my sisters. Kiara is 12. The twins Alexis and Amara are 9. Desiree is 5, and Zoe is 2. Where is your mother? James asked. Tamara's brave face crumbled. She left yesterday. She said she needed to clear her head. Sometimes she goes away for days. James called for backup and social services. He sat with the girls while they waited. Zoe, the toddler, climbed into his lap without fear and fell asleep against his chest. Something about her trust touched his heart. Social worker Ms. Peterson arrived and explained the situation. Their mother, Letitia Davis, was found unconscious in a motel. Drug overdose. She's in the hospital now. This isn't the first time. We need to find placement for the girls. Do they have other family? James asked. A grandmother who passed last year. No father listed on birth certificates. We'll have to put them in emergency foster care, Miss Peterson said with a sigh. Unfortunately, finding a home for 6 sisters together is almost impossible. They'll likely be separated. Tamara overheard this and stood up straight. We're staying together. I promised Mom we would always stay together. James watched as the girl tried to be brave for her sisters. Kiara hugged the twins, who looked scared. Desiree clutched her sister's hand. Little Zoe was still sleeping against James. Something shifted inside James at that moment. Before he could think it through, he spoke. What if I take them? Just temporarily, until something permanent can be arranged. Miss Peterson looked shocked. Officer Brennan, that's unusual. You're single, you work long hours. I have a 3-bedroom house. I can take emergency leave. These girls need to stay together, James said, surprising himself with his certainty. 4 hours later, after many phone calls and emergency paperwork, James led 6 quiet girls into his home. He had no toys, no children's books, no small clothes. He had no experience as a father. It's not much, but you're all safe here, he told them, showing them around. Tamara still looked suspicious. Why are you doing this? James thought for a moment. Because everyone deserves someone who will fight to keep them together. That night, as James made makeshift beds and ordered pizza, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. He had no idea how much his life was about to change. The first morning in Officer James Brennan's house was chaos. He woke up at 5:30 a.m. as usual, but instead of his quiet coffee routine, he found Zoe, the 2-year-old, crying in the living room. She had wet the couch where she slept. It's okay, sweetie, James said, picking her up awkwardly. He had never changed a diaper before. After 3 attempts and a YouTube video, he managed it. By 6:30 a.m., all 6 girls were awake. The small bathroom became a battleground. Tamara takes too long. Kiara complained, pounding on the door. The twins used all the hot water. Tamara shot back when she finally emerged. James stood in his kitchen, overwhelmed. What did children eat for breakfast? He found some bread and eggs in his nearly empty fridge. I don't like eggs, Alexis announced. Me neither, Amara agreed. The twins did everything together. Just eat what Officer Brennan made, Tamara ordered her sisters. Please call me James, he said, serving burnt toast. 5-year-old Desiree looked at her plate with big eyes. My toast is black. James sighed. This was harder than any police shift he had worked. Later that day, his partner Mike stopped by with bags of children's clothes, toys, and food. My wife sent these. Our kids outgrew them, Mike explained, then lowered his voice. Are you sure about this, James? 6 kids? Black kids? People are talking at the station. Let them talk, James said firmly. These girls needed help. That night, James made spaghetti. It was one of the 3 meals he knew how to cook. The girls ate silently around his small dining table. Tomorrow we need to get you registered for school, James said. Tamara looked up sharply. We're not staying long. Mom will come get us soon. James nodded, not wanting to tell them their mother would be in rehab for at least 30 days, followed by court hearings to determine if she could regain custody. After dinner, James was washing dishes when he heard screaming. He ran to the living room to find the twins fighting over the remote control. I want cartoons, Alexis yelled. I want the music channel, Amara shouted back. Girls, please. James started, but was interrupted by Zoe crying again. She had pulled a lamp down, nearly hitting herself. Tamara swooped in, picking up her baby sister. I got her, she said coldly to James. You don't know what you're doing. The words stung because they were true. James had no idea what he was doing. That night, after finally getting everyone to bed, James collapsed on the couch, exhausted. He picked up a photo of his late wife, Sarah. What have I gotten myself into? He whispered. I'm not cut out to be a father, especially to 6 girls who have been through so much. His phone buzzed with a text from his police captain, meeting tomorrow about your situation, some concerns. James rubbed his face. His colleagues didn't understand. Some thought he was trying to be some kind of white savior. Others questioned his motives for taking in 6 black girls. None of them knew how it felt to see those sisters facing separation. Just then, tiny footsteps padded into the living room. It was Zoe, clutching her teddy bear. Bad dream, she said simply, climbing onto the couch beside him. James hesitated, then put his arm around her small shoulders. Within minutes, she was asleep against him, trusting him completely. Looking down at her peaceful face, James made a decision. He would prove everyone wrong, his doubting colleagues, his own insecurities, and especially Tamara's suspicion. These girls deserve better than what life had given them so far. We'll figure this out, he whispered to the sleeping child. Somehow, 3 weeks passed in James Brennan's home. The chaos hadn't disappeared, but small routines were forming. James learned that Kiara liked her sandwiches cut diagonally. The twins would only brush their teeth if they could use purple toothbrushes. Desiree needed a story before bed, and Zoe would only fall asleep with her teddy bear and a blue nightlight. But Tamara remained distant. The 14-year-old watched James with careful eyes, never fully trusting. One Thursday afternoon, James's phone rang while he was making dinner. It was Tamara's school. Officer Brennan, this is Principal Wilson. There's been an incident with Tamara. She got into a fight. You need to come in. James found her sitting outside the principal's office, arms crossed, a small cut on her cheek. What happened? He asked. Tamara stared at the floor. Nothing. Principal Wilson explained that another student had made comments about Tamara's mother and her white cop foster dad. Tamara had thrown the first punch. On the drive home, James tried to break the silence. You want to tell me your side? Why do you care? Tamara snapped. You're just doing this to look good. The heroic white police officer saving the poor black kids. I bet you love the attention. James pulled the car over and turned to face her. Is that what you think? Everyone at school does. They say you're using us. James took a deep breath. Tamara, I'm not perfect. I'm learning as I go. But I promise you, I'm not using you or your sisters for anything. Tamara looked away, unconvinced. The next day was James's day off. Instead of catching up on sleep, he drove Tamara to the police station. What are we doing here? She asked suspiciously. I want to show you something. Inside, James introduced Tamara to the dispatchers, the detectives, and fellow officers. Many knew her story and welcomed her warmly. This is Mrs. Jackson. James said, introducing Tamara to an older black woman at a desk covered with photos. She runs our community outreach programs. Mrs. Jackson smiled. James has told me about you and your sisters. He's been worried about you. Tamara looked surprised. He has. Every day, asking advice about hair products, school concerns, everything. Mrs. Jackson leaned closer. Between us, I think he's scared of messing up. This made Tamara smile slightly. Later, James let Tamara sit in a patrol car while he explained his daily work. Most of my job isn't chasing criminals, he told her. It's helping people who are having the worst day of their lives. Tamara fingered the radio. Like when you came to our house? James nodded. That day changed my life too, you know. On the way home, they stopped for ice cream. Sitting on a park bench, Tamara finally opened up. Those kids at school, they said Mom's never coming back, that she doesn't want us. Her voice trembled. They said we'll get split up soon anyway. James felt his heart ache. Your mom is sick, Tamara. She's getting help. And while she does, I promise you and your sisters will stay together. You can't promise that, Tamara said, but with less anger than before. Watch me try, James replied. That evening, James heard laughter from the living room. He found Tamara showing Kiara and the twins how to braid hair. She had arranged the younger girls in a line and was demonstrating on a doll. Our mom taught me, Tamara had explained when she noticed James watching. I should probably teach you too. You're terrible at doing Zoe's hair. James laughed. I am pretty bad at it. Sit down, Tamara ordered, patting the floor. Lesson 1. Never use a regular brush on curly hair. As James sat surrounded by giggling girls, he felt something shift between him and Tamara. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a beginning. One small step toward becoming a family. 2 months had passed since the girls moved in with Officer James Brennan. His house now had pink backpacks hanging by the door, colorful drawings stuck to the refrigerator, and hair accessories scattered across the bathroom counter. What was once a quiet bachelor pad had transformed into a lively home. One Tuesday morning, Miss Peterson, the social worker, arrived for her monthly visit. James had just gotten the younger girls off to school, and only Tamara was home with a minor cold. Officer Brennan, I need to speak with you privately, Miss Peterson said after checking the house. James led her to the kitchen while Tamara watched TV in the living room. We've located a maternal aunt in Detroit, Miss Peterson said. Her name is Yvette Wilson. She's willing to take 2 of the girls. James felt his stomach drop. 2? Which 2? She specifically mentioned the twins, Alexis and Amara. Says she can handle 2 9-year-olds, but not all 6. James gripped the edge of the counter. You can't separate them. They need to stay together. Miss Peterson looked sympathetic but firm. Family placement takes priority over foster care, and let's be realistic, Officer Brennan. Your emergency fostering was always temporary. What about the mother's wishes? Letitia wanted them to stay together, James argued. Miss Davis is still in rehab. She's making progress but has at least 3 more months, followed by court evaluations. She doesn't have legal standing right now. James lowered his voice. These girls have lost everything. Their home, temporarily their mother. If we separate them, they lose each other too. The twins will be devastated. And what about the others? Do you know what this will do to Tamara? From the doorway came a small voice. You're giving us away. James turned to see Tamara standing there, tears in her eyes. No one is giving anyone away, James said quickly. You promised we'd stay together. Tamara cried. You're just like everyone else. You lied. She ran to her room, slamming the door. After Miss Peterson left, James sat at his kitchen table with his head in his hands. Then he made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Mike, his partner who had become his biggest supporter. I need a lawyer, James said. I want to adopt all 6 girls. The next day, James met with attorney Regina Walsh, who specialized in adoption law. It won't be easy, she warned. Single adoptive parents face extra scrutiny. Add in the cross-racial element, and the courts will have questions. They'll want to ensure you understand the cultural needs of Black children. I'm learning, James said. Tamara's teaching me about hair care. I found a church with a diverse congregation. I've been reading books about transracial adoption. Regina nodded. Good start, but not enough. The courts will also wonder if a police officer with unpredictable hours can manage 6 children. I've already requested a transfer to the training division. Regular hours, weekends off. What about the aunt in Detroit? James sighed. She only wants the twins. I can't let that happen. When James got home, he found Tamara helping Desiree with homework while Zoe napped nearby. The twins were quietly reading. Kiara was drawing at the table. Family meeting, James announced. When everyone gathered, he took a deep breath. I want to talk about making our arrangement permanent. I'm looking into adopting all of you. The room went silent. What about Mom? Kiara asked. Your mom will always be your mom, James explained carefully, but she has a long road ahead. I want to give you stability while she gets better. And most importantly, I want to make sure you all stay together. You really want us? Alexis asked. Forever? I really do, James said. But only if you all want that too. He looked at Tamara, whose eyes were filled with conflicting emotions. I'm not trying to replace anyone, James told her. I'm just trying to keep a promise. That night, as James tucked Zoe into bed, he knew the battle with the system was just beginning. But looking at the sleeping toddler, he knew it was a fight worth having. James stood in the empty living room of the 2-story house, imagining where everything would go. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 2 downstairs, a big backyard with a swing set. It was perfect. What do you think? He asked the girls as they explored their potential new home. It's so big, Desiree exclaimed, her small voice echoing in the empty space. Tamara walked through slowly, measuring each room with thoughtful eyes. The twins could share this room, she said, pointing to a sunny upstairs bedroom. Kiara and Desiree could take the blue room, and Zoe could stay with me in the big room. And I'll take the downstairs bedroom, James added. That leaves 1 extra room, maybe a playroom or study space. 3 months had passed since James decided to pursue adoption. His lawyer, Regina, had helped him file the necessary paperwork. The process was moving slowly, but James was determined. The first step was creating a proper home for a family of 7. Can we really move here? Kiara asked, her fingers tracing the windowsill. If everyone likes it, James said. The neighborhood has good schools, and there's a park 2 blocks away. The girls' excitement was clear as they ran from room to room, claiming spaces and planning decorations. Even Tamara seemed pleased, though she tried to hide it. 2 weeks later, they moved in. James's police colleagues formed a moving crew, carrying furniture and boxes into the new house. Mrs. Jackson from Community Outreach organized a home blessing, bringing food and guests from the neighborhood. This is Diane and her daughter Maya, Mrs. Jackson said, introducing a black woman and her teenage daughter. They live next door. My Maya is just a year older than Tamara, Diane explained warmly. And I teach at the middle school your twins will attend. James watched gratefully as Maya immediately invited Tamara to see her room. Having neighbors who looked like the girls was important. It was one of the reasons he'd chosen this diverse neighborhood. That night, after tucking in the younger girls, James found Tamara sitting on the front porch. You didn't have to do all this, she said quietly. James sat beside her. I wanted to. People stare at us when we're out together, Tamara said. At the store yesterday, a lady asked if you were my social worker. James nodded. People will always have questions. Some might even say hurtful things. But what matters is what we know about our family. Are we a family? Tamara asked, her voice uncertain. I think we're becoming one, James replied. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who stays when things get hard. The next day brought their first challenge in the new house. Kiara came home from school in tears. A boy said I can't be Officer Brennan's daughter because we don't match, she sobbed. He said we're just a charity case. James felt a flash of anger, then sadness. He'd known these moments would come but hadn't expected them so soon. Come with me, he said to Kiara. He called the other girls into the living room. I think it's time for our first official family meeting. They gathered in a circle. Even little Zoe sat attentively on Tamara's lap. Sometimes people won't understand our family, James began. They might say things that hurt. But here's what I know. Family is built on love, not looks. We're different in many ways, and that's good. We learn from each other. Like how you learned to make cornbread from Mom's recipe book? Alexis asked. And how we taught you to play double dutch? Amara added. James smiled. Exactly. We're not a perfect family, but we're our family, and nothing anyone says can change that. As the girls shared other instances of comments they'd heard, James realized something important. These conversations might be difficult, but having them together made them bearable. Day by day, they were building not just a house, but a home. James was making Saturday breakfast when his phone rang. He balanced Zoe on his hip while flipping pancakes and answered the call. Officer Brennan, this is West Side Recovery Center. Letitia Davis has completed her 90-day program. She's asking about her daughters. The spatula froze in James's hand. He had known this day would come, but it still caught him off guard. She'd like to see the girls, the counselor continued. Would next weekend work for a supervised visit? After hanging up, James sat at the kitchen table, his mind racing. The adoption paperwork was moving forward. The girls were settling into their new home and schools. He had just painted the twins' bedroom the purple color they wanted. Tamara walked in and immediately noticed his expression. What's wrong? That was your mom's treatment center. She's completed her program and wants to see you all next weekend. Tamara's face filled with conflicting emotions: hope, fear, excitement, uncertainty. Is she taking us back? No, sweetheart. It's just a visit for now. She still has a long recovery journey. When James told the other girls, reactions varied. Kiara and the twins jumped with excitement. Desiree looked confused. Zoe, who barely remembered her mother, clung to James. The week passed too quickly. James helped the girls pick outfits for the visit and tried to prepare them without setting expectations too high. On Saturday morning, they drove to the family center where supervised visits took place. James's stomach was in knots. What if Letitia resented him? What if the girls wanted to leave with her? In the waiting room, Kiara fidgeted nervously. What if Mom doesn't recognize me? I got taller. She'll know you, James assured her, though his own heart was pounding. The door opened, and Letitia Davis entered. She looked healthier than when James had first met her, clear-eyed, with more weight on her slim frame. Her hair was styled neatly, and she wore a simple blue dress. Mommy, Desiree cried, running to her. The other girls followed, creating a tangle of hugs and tears. James stood back, giving them space. This was their moment, but his chest ached watching the reunion. He loved these girls. The thought of losing them was unbearable. Letitia looked over the girls' heads at James. Their eyes met in a long, complicated gaze. Finally, she gently untangled herself from the children and walked over to him. Officer Brennan, she said softly. Thank you for keeping them together. They're amazing kids, James replied. You should be proud. After an awkward pause, James added, I'll wait outside to give you privacy. No, Letitia said. Stay. They talk about you all the time. I want to hear about these months I missed. The visit lasted 2 hours. The girls showed their mother pictures of their new house. Tamara explained her science project. The twins demonstrated a dance routine they had learned. Through it all, Letitia listened attentively, asking questions and soaking in every detail of their lives. Near the end, while the younger girls colored at a table, Letitia spoke quietly to James. The center says I need 6 more months of outpatient treatment before I can petition for custody. James nodded, uncertain what to say. The girls seem happy, she continued. Tamara says you're learning to do their hair properly. James smiled slightly. I'm trying. I've watched a lot of YouTube tutorials. Letitia's eyes filled with tears. I messed up so badly, but I'm fighting to get better. For them. I know you are, James said. And they need you in their lives. What if? Letitia hesitated. What if there's a way for us both to be there for them? As they left the center, Tamara walked between James and her mother. The younger girls ran ahead to the car. Mom's coming for dinner next Saturday, Tamara told James. She said you invited her. James nodded. It would be complicated. There would be hard conversations ahead. But seeing the hope in Tamara's eyes, he knew they would find a way forward, together. The community center buzzed with activity as James set up chairs for the evening meeting. It had been 8 months since he first brought the girls home, and 5 months since Letitia completed her initial treatment program. Need some help with those? Mike asked, grabbing a stack of chairs. Thanks, partner, James said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Tonight was the first meeting of Bridges, a support group James had created for foster and adoptive families in cross-cultural situations. The idea came after he struggled to find resources for his own unique family. Nervous? Mike asked, setting up the last chair. A little, James admitted. Public speaking isn't exactly my thing. The door opened, and Diane from next door entered with her husband. Then came Mrs. Jackson from the police department's community outreach. Soon the room filled with people, some families like James's, others just curious community members, and a few skeptical faces. James stood at the front, clearing his throat. I'm Officer James Brennan. A year ago, I was just a cop doing my job. Then I met 6 sisters who changed everything. As James shared his story, he noticed Letitia slip into the back of the room. She came to every meeting, even though it must have been difficult to hear about the time she missed with her daughters. We're not here to pretend it's easy, James continued. My girls face challenges I never experienced. They have a white father and a black mother. They navigate 2 households and many questions. But together we're learning. After the meeting, people gathered in small groups, sharing stories and exchanging phone numbers. James watched as Tamara helped serve cookies, looking more confident than the angry teen he first met. Officer Brennan, a young black officer, approached him. I've been thinking about fostering. Could we talk sometime? Of course, James said, genuinely pleased. And please call me James. Later that evening, James drove to the police station for his shift. His schedule had improved since transferring to the training division, but he still worked occasional night shifts. On those nights, Letitia stayed at the house with the girls, an arrangement that had surprised everyone but seemed to work. Captain Reynolds called James into his office as soon as he arrived. Brennan, that community program of yours is getting attention. The mayor mentioned it at the council meeting yesterday. James nodded uncomfortably. Just trying to help families like mine, sir. Well, it's doing more than that, Reynolds replied. Applications for our youth engagement programs are up 30%. We got more diversity in ride-along requests than ever before. James hadn't expected this ripple effect. When he became a cop 15 years ago, he thought his job was simply to enforce laws. Now he understood that true policing meant building bridges in the community. At home the next morning, James found Letitia in the kitchen making breakfast with Desiree and Zoe. The co-parenting arrangement had been challenging at first, but they had found a rhythm that put the girls' needs first. Daddy, Zoe shouted, running to him. At almost 3, she now called both James and her biological mother's boyfriend Daddy, sometimes causing confusion but always with love. Tamara got her letter, Letitia said, smiling. It came after you left for work. James felt a surge of excitement. Tamara had applied for a competitive summer program at the local university, a science camp for promising students. He found Tamara in the backyard, sitting under the oak tree with the letter in her hands. I got in, she said, looking up at him. They only accepted 20 students from the whole city. James sat beside her. I never doubted you for a second. My essay was about family, Tamara said quietly. About how family isn't what I thought it was. It's bigger. More complicated. Is that good or bad? James asked. Tamara smiled. A full, genuine smile that still made James's heart swell with pride. It's better, she said simply. Different, but better. The courthouse hallway was crowded with people dressed in their best clothes. James Brennan straightened his rarely worn tie while checking that all 6 girls looked presentable. After 18 months of paperwork, home studies, and court hearings, today was finally adoption day. Stop fidgeting, Tamara told the twins, fixing Alexis's hair clip. At 16, Tamara had grown into a confident young woman who often took charge when James was overwhelmed. I'm too excited to stand still, Amara protested, bouncing on her toes. 4-year-old Zoe twirled in her new yellow dress, making James smile despite his nerves. Kiara and Desiree sat quietly on a bench, holding hands. All rise, called the bailiff from inside the courtroom. James gathered the girls and led them inside. The courtroom was packed with supporters, Mike and his family, Mrs. Jackson, neighbors, teachers, and colleagues from the police department. Even Captain Reynolds had come, sitting stiffly in his uniform at the back. Most surprising was the front row, where Letitia sat with her boyfriend Marcus. She wore a beautiful blue dress and had tears in her eyes already. This day was bittersweet for her, James knew. She had made the difficult decision to support the adoption after realizing that her recovery journey would take years. Today we finalized the adoption of Tamara, Kiara, Alexis, Amara, Desiree, and Zoe by James Brennan, the judge announced, smiling at the unusual family before her. The legal proceedings were surprisingly simple after all the complex preparation. James answered questions about his commitment to the girls, his understanding of their cultural needs, and his plans for their future. When asked if he understood the permanent nature of adoption, James looked at each girl before answering. "Your Honor, these children have been my daughters in my heart since the day they came into my life. This just makes official what we already know." The judge then turned to the girls. "I'd like to hear from each of you. Tamara, as the oldest, would you like to speak first?" Tamara stood, smoothing her dress nervously. "When Officer Brennan first came to our house, I hated him," she said bluntly, causing soft laughter in the courtroom. "I thought he was trying to take us from our mom. I didn't understand that sometimes love means making hard choices." She looked at Letitia, then at James. "Now I have two parents who love me in different ways. My mom is working hard on her recovery, and she visits us every week. And James," she paused, "Dad, he keeps his promises. He makes sure we stay connected to our culture and our history. He learned to do our hair right." One by one, each girl spoke. Kiara talked about James attending her basketball games. The twins described how he helped with science projects. Desiree mentioned bedtime stories. Zoe simply said, "He makes good pancakes," making everyone laugh. Finally, the judge asked, "Letitia Davis, would you like to say anything?" Letitia stood, wiping tears. "I made mistakes that hurt my daughters. The hardest thing I've ever done was admit I couldn't care for them properly while fighting my addiction. But the best thing I ever did was let this good man love them when I couldn't." She looked directly at James. "Thank you for not shutting me out, for letting me still be their mother while you became their father." The judge smiled, clearly moved. "Based on all evidence and testimony, I find this adoption to be in the best interest of these children. The adoption is hereby finalized." She banged her gavel, and the room erupted in cheers. Outside the courthouse, the now official Brennan family posed for photos. James stood surrounded by his daughters, still amazed at how his life had changed. "So what do we do now?" Kiara asked. "Ice cream," the twins shouted in unison. As they walked to the cars, Tamara fell in step beside James. "Did you ever think, when you got that call that day, that this is where we'd end up?" James shook his head. "Not for a second, but I wouldn't change anything." "Me neither," Tamara said, linking her arm through his. "Dad." The word still felt new, but it fit perfectly, just like their unconventional, beautiful family.